See,
Yep.
This meeting is being recorded.
that helps you there.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Just before we get going, I just want to let everyone be aware this meeting's being recorded due to the Mass General Law. So, meeting of the Scituate Board of Health for Monday, November 14th, 6 p.m., a Zoom call. Meetings being called to order. Acceptance of the agenda. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so Doug votes yes. Karen, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Kelly?
Yes.
Okay, so to get the meeting started, scheduled items, discuss and vote septic system design hearing, 1 Tilden Ave, Morse Engineer, Inc. representing homeowner request of installation of a septic system regarding local upgrades and variants. Greg, are you on?
Yep, unmute yourself, Greg.
He could not do that right away. Now, Greg, you should be okay to do that and start your videos should you so wish.
Great, thank you. Yeah, wasn't letting me unmute, but
Okay,
if-
so
for the
just
record,
state your name and
yeah, for the record, Gregory Morse, registered engineer, Morse Engineering. I'm representing the property owner near Drury. The property is located at 1 Tilden Ave. As was just stated, this is a septic system repair project. The property at 1 Tilden Ave is an extremely small lot. It's located at the end of Glades Road, down in the Minot section of town. The lot itself is approximately 653 square feet in size. There's an existing 1-bedroom home on the property. The home was serviced by a septic system a couple of years ago. It was essentially a 55-gallon drum that was buried in the ground, which is not uncommon for old historic cottages such as this in that area. That drum was ruptured and broken during installation of a new gas line in the vicinity of the house. And since that time, the house has been uninhabitable. What we've submitted on our plan is a replacement for that system. The replacement is a tight tank system. In looking at the site, it is not feasible to construct a Title V compliant septic system with respect to the existing home location and the size of the lot. So what we've proposed is we've proposed to install 2 tight tanks that would be in series. Each tank is 300 gallons in size. So it would allow a 600-gallon tight tank holding capacity. You know, a tight tank is a system that has no leaching component to it. There is no leaching field. When these tanks become full, they get pumped out. A pump contractor would be on retainer to perform those pump outs. The tight tanks themselves are equipped with an alarm so that when they reach 2/3 capacity, excuse me, 3/5 capacity, the alarm goes off, triggering the homeowner to notify the pump operator to come and pump the system out. This is a seasonal residence. This is not a year-round home. It does require a multitude here of local upgrade approvals, mainly due to setbacks with property lines, setbacks to water services, and setbacks to foundations on our site, as well as the abutters sites. It also requires a Title V variance. The variance in this case is to allow construction of a tight tank of 600 gallons capacity instead of 2,000 gallons capacity, which is the minimum Title V requirement. There is no way to comply with a 2,000 gallon tight tank at this site. I would note that in coming up with that 2,000 gallon requirement in Title V, essentially they looked at a single family home and multiplied the single family home rate times 5, which is 330 gallons times 5, yielding a minimum of a 2,000 gallon tank. In this case here, this home is extremely small and it's again, only one bedroom. One bedroom producing 110 gallons per day with a multiplier of 5 yields 550 gallons. We're proposing a 600 gallon capacity system. I'd turn it over to you for any questions or comments. I can go through the individual setbacks if you need, but I think they're fairly self-explanatory on the plan. I turn it over to you.
Doug,
Joan, do you
before you open it up to any of the board members, do you want to see if the residents have any questions before you guys get into it?
Sure. I'm
So
not
if
sure.
any residents have any questions or comments, Seth, do they have the ability to unmute
They
themselves?
most certainly do not, but I can help you with that. Francis, you should be able to unmute yourself and just state your name, address, and go ahead with your question if you.
I don't have a
Thank
question,
you.
I have a comment. This is the appropriate time for both comments, I guess.
Sure.
My name is Francis O'Mara. I live at 15 Judges Hill Drive in Norwell. The property next to the subject property, 143 Glades Road, is a piece of property that's been in the O'Mara family since 1950. My brother and I now own it, and we've owned it for years. The whole family has owned it since 1950. The structure, I won't even call it a home, the structure that's behind us and has been behind us for decades. First of all, I know that they say it's a one bedroom. Well, it's not a one bedroom. If you look at the floor plan, the second floor speaks about sitting and storage. And for decades now, we get 10, 12 people on that second floor using that as 3 bedrooms. That'll be used as 3 bedrooms when this is sold for sure. And we'll have all the same problems we've had over the many decades down there with this property. I'm a developer of some sort, as is the gentleman who's applied for this. He was down there, he did due diligence, so he knows fully well the problems that he was going to have. Everybody knows it's not a buildable lot because of the various requirements and reductions. Here, he wants our town to approve from a 10-foot requirement on the property line to 2 inches. And then on the other end, 10 feet from the foundation, 3 inches. So instead of having 20 feet, 10 feet from the property line and 10 feet from his own foundation, he wants us to allow him to do it to a stick of 6 inches. That's outrageous. The reason why they're saying 600, they're not asking for 2,000 is because they want to stay with what looks like a 1-bedroom house. It hasn't been a 1-bedroom house for the 70 years that we've been there, and it's not going to be when it's built. I'm not saying that's what the builder's going to try to do, but I'm going to tell you that's what's going to happen. There's also the requirement requirements that you allow a 600-gallon. That tank will be filled every week. Every week or 10 days, the tank is going to be filled. And it's 5 feet away from my foundation. It's 5 feet away from Dennis Richardson's foundation, who couldn't be here tonight, but he's with me on this. He owns the house on the other side of it. As a matter of fact, outrageous as this is, the tight tank is 5.9 feet away from Dennis's foundation, not just from his foundation line, but from the foundation of his house. This is something that should not be allowed. A lot of people looked at this, including me, and knew fully well the smartest thing to do was to knock it down and just let it be for parking. That's what Dennis was going to do, and that's why none of us bid on this, because Dennis was going to take it, knock down this atrocity that's there, and that we've all had to deal with down there for years. And now to come in and say, well, it's only going to be 1 bedroom and it's going to be this, and it's only a summer residence. It's not going to be a summer residence. The builder didn't pay the type of money he did for a lot there to sell a house to people for the 1 bedroom that's going to be a summer residence. That's outrageous to even propose that as the truth. We don't want it down there. The neighborhood doesn't want it down there. We wanted tenants to get it and knock it down. The builder, the developer outbid him. That's legal. No problem with that. He did outbid him. Dennis was willing to pay upwards of $200,000 for two parking spaces, but the builder was willing to pay more, and he took it. And now to think that he's going to have a 1-bedroom house there with these tanks that are on top of him, on top of the property line, on top of the neighbors, is just wrong, and it shouldn't be allowed. You shouldn't allow somebody to come in and ask our town to approve such an incredibly large system in such an incredibly small house, with all these variances just to make a buildable lot where there is not a buildable lot. Thank you. I'll answer any questions that anyone has.
Okay.
Anybody else have any comments or questions? Go ahead, Bill. Can you unmute yourself?
Bill, you'll
Trying
see an
to.
alert right there. There you go, Bill. You should be good now.
Okay. Thank you. I have a couple of questions and some things can be clarified. Is this a seasonal house? That's
You need to
six-
state your name, excuse me, you need to state your
Excuse
name and
me.
address.
Sure, thank you.
Okay.
It's William Graham, 14 Tilden Ave. Okay, and I have is this a seasonal house of 6 months or less? Or is this to be a year-round house? It has been a year-round house in the past. Is this a plan for new construction or a rehab of the existing building? If the existing building is going to be used, does it meet the standards of the town for human habitation, such as the stability of the house? The pilings underneath it are not cement, as was stated previously. They're wooden poles, and they've been in there for over 100 years. So I don't know what the condition of it is or the floor beams, but I would doubt that they're very reliable at this point. The house has no insulation. It only has one exit door, and it will not pass any of the current standards. I understand that if the renovations for the building permit to repair it would exceed 50% of the value of the house, that it would have to conform to the new standards of the town. And those standards would include elevation out of the flood zone. I don't know if that's planned, but I would like to find out. The 2 300-gallon tanks that are supposed to be in front of the house, these would be not be able to be filled to capacity because one flows into the other and then the alarm goes off at 3/5 of a tank. So you're really looking at 500 gallons or less. And from the standards that I've been able to look at, each individual uses approximately 100 gallons per day. So that would be 5 days worth of water going out because there is no disbursement of it. It's totally contained. So that would mean that the place would have to be pumped every 5 days. And to do so, the truck would have to come in and would block Tilden Ave, which is used by 15 other residents. So we would be blocked from exiting our property while this pumping was going on. The plan doesn't call for any vents of the tanks or the venting of the toilets. So I think that's important. The plan as submitted indicates that the soil pipe would go from the back of the house to the front of the house. And the proposal is to run it on the side of the house between a small alleyway that's about 30 inches wide. And that is owned by partially Mr. Richardson and the property at 1 Tilden. This pipe should be run underneath the house. There's a crawl space under the house, and the pipe should be run under the house rather than on the edge of the property. The septic tanks themselves would be in a severe erosion area. Tilden Ave gets wiped out in the storms. We have 3, 4, 5 foot craters that are washed out in the heavy storms. These tanks would be susceptible to that. I don't see anything in the description of the tanks that would say that these tanks are weighted to keep them in the ground in case of hydraulic pressure to lift them up. I would like that to be clarified because I think that's a major concern. The hole that would have to be dug to put these tanks in would have to be at least 60 inches deep. that is right at the edge of the home, which I'm sure that the wooden pilings that are in place now would collapse when the hole is dug, because there'd be nothing to support them. This is a very bad situation they have there. One possible solution would be possibly to cut down the size of the house. Take 10 or 15 feet off the front of the house and put the septic tank in that location. It would be enclosed in the pilings that are there, as long as they don't collapse when you're excavating it. The best solution is for this house to be taken down, a new house to be built, if possible, put pilings in, put a legitimate septic system in underneath the house. That would be naturally expensive, but that is what the best solution would be. The other situation we have also is with these septic tanks being in front of the house, there would be cement billets that would be protecting it at the very edge of the property. There is no parking on this property, no provision for parking an automobile, whether one or two automobiles. There's no provision at all. So I think this is a very bad proposal, and I would hope that the board would reject it. Thank you.
And Mr. White, you do have another hand raised here. It is Heather. Heather, if you want to just state your name, address, and go ahead with your comment, you should be able to unmute yourself. Heather, if you're on that phone, there you go.
She's still muted.
I think she's gone now. I don't know. You don't have any more hands raised.
Greg, do you want to address any of the questions and concerns that they have?
Sure. This is a difficult lot, and this is a existing home on the property. As we've heard, it's been there for decades. We're trying to fix the septic system that's in place. We don't have any intention at this point of ripping the house down, putting it up on pilings. The intent is to keep the house that's there. If we were putting this house up on pilings, we'd have room to put a septic system under the house in between the pilings. And I would propose that, certainly. I've done that on other sites down on Glades Road. That's not the scenario that we have here. There isn't enough room in the crawl space to put a system underneath this house. We've cited this the best feasible way that I see a contractor could build this. Is it tight to the property lines? Yes. Is it tight to abutting foundations? You know, the Richardson Foundation is 5.9 feet away from this tank. I would note that the existing septic tank on the Richardson property is about 2 feet away from his foundation. It certainly is possible to put a tight tank 5.9 feet away. That's not a problem. You know, if this property were increased in value by more than 50%, the house, it would be required to go up on piles and be compliant with FEMA. You know, I think if the Board of Health were to grant this variance and approve this plan, you know, I would expect a number of conditions to be placed on that permit. One, that this is a 1-bedroom house. We're not using it as a 3-bedroom house. This is a 1-bedroom house. I would expect that in the event there was ever new construction on the property, you know, which you could define as raising the house up on piles, that a Title V septic system would be installed under the house. I would expect that as a condition, and I would expect that this would be limited as a seasonal house. And at the beginning and end of each season, an inspection would be done to make sure that the tanks are watertight and that they're pumped out at the end of the season so that they are dry over the course of the winter. And that in the springtime, when the system is started up, that the floats are in proper working condition, and that any erosion that was over the system would be replaced with similar material over the system. This is an area that is flood prone, certainly. It's a tough lot, but it's the same setback requests that you see on a lot of lots down Glades Road. This is the best that can be done here. The house isn't being leveled and the lot being donated to the abutters for parking spaces. We're trying to fix a failed septic system. The intent is for a one-bedroom house.
And Mr. White, you do have two hands raised. Heather is back if you want to hear more comments, yes?
Yep.
Heather,
Heather,
go
do you
ahead.
wanna-
Heather, you just muted yourself. Heather, there you go. Just your name, address,
Okay.
and go ahead with your comment.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, I'm Heather Sprague. I live across Tilden Ave at 139 Glades Road. My concern has to do with the frequency that this 600-gallon system is going to need to be pumped out at in order to approve a variance, from 2,000 down to 600. Has the board considered how often that's going to need to be pumped and how that's, like, mechanically, how that's going to happen? Tilden Ave is already very tight. And if a septic truck is being parked there once a week, how is everybody going to get out of the street, and how are emergency vehicles going to get down there?
Well, I'm assuming a septic tank is only going to be parked there for 20 minutes at a time. And I mean, if an emergency vehicle has to come down, there's going to be someone there that can move the vehicle to it. I mean, it's no different than getting an oil delivery to a house down there.
There aren't any oil deliveries at houses down there. So, I mean, how often does a 600-gallon tank need to get pumped out?
It depends upon how often they're used.
So
We have houses that are on Peggotty Beach that have tight tanks that get pumped out twice a summer. We also have houses on Peggotty Beach that have tight tanks that are actual functioning tight tanks, the alarms and everything, that weren't even used this summer. No one rented that, they were empty all summer long. So, I mean, it's hard to say. That's why we have the alarms. When the alarm goes off, that's the notification to the homeowner to get the retainer for whoever the pumping team is that's going to be coming out to come out and pump it.
Electricity.
And how is that enforced? How is it going to be enforced that this is just going to be a one-bedroom used in the summer that's only going to need to be pumped twice this season?
I didn't say that.
There's a deed restriction on this property. There'd be
Okay, so there'll be a written restriction on the deed that it's not permitted to be sold for anything other than a one-bedroom summer rental.
there would be a deed restriction for a one-bedroom house for a tight tank, and the board can request a seasonal deed restriction, a seasonal house restriction.
Okay, is the board currently requesting that?
We haven't gone there yet because
The board hasn't discussed it
we
yet.
haven't
We're getting
discussed
all your
that.
comments now.
Okay, I mean, I'm concerned because it's already a very tight space. I'd like to see the board at least come down and look at the area. This is a really significant variance that's being requested here. And to do this over Zoom without even walking the land, to me, doesn't seem responsible. I think you would at least need to look at it and examine the impact of the frequency with which this thing is going to need to be pumped out, and the possible detriment to the neighbors in terms of being able to access their property and to have emergency vehicles to get down there. 20 minutes may not seem like a lot of time, but it's a lot of time if you're waiting for an ambulance. I guess that's the only other comment that I have at this time. I'd like to see the board actually look at the property. I guess I have one other question. When the developer is saying that the only thing that he can do is 600 gallons, has he considered knocking, like, if the house is knocked down and elevated, can a standard 2,000 gallon tank be put underneath the structure? I mean, isn't that what would be the best use for this property, is to have the existing nuisance property that we've all been dealing with for years torn down, and a residence put up on stilts with a standard 2,000 gallon septic system underneath it? Why can't that be done? It seems to me that what's being pushed here is simply what's the fastest and the cheapest, and not necessarily what's the best use for the property.
So the board can't order a private residence to knock down a piece of property and build something else. If that is the case, that they did knock it down, we could require that they put in a normal Title V septic system. Mr. Morse already said that if they did do stilts, if they did do it that way, that he has done design plans for, you know, systems underneath houses on pilings. But the board can't tell a developer how to develop his property. It's just not in our jurisdiction, I guess.
But you could not, you're being asked to approve a variance. You have the power to not approve that.
It's an existing property that has had people there and living there for years and years. and years.
Nobody's living,
Yeah, but
I'm sorry,
it's still existing though. And that those property owners have rights.
Correct. It's a new
right, but
property.
the property purchased, I'm sorry, I just want to close the loop on this. A property was purchased as is, where is, without a functioning septic system.
Correct.
So that property, the right that the developer purchased was exactly what he has right now.
Correct.
And he's asking you to approve a variance, a departure from a statute that was passed saying that what's in the best interest of the environment and the community is a 2,000 gallon tank. And he's asking you to depart from that, and he has to have a reason. And my concern is that the reason is that it's what's in the best interest of the developer economically in terms of time and speed and cost. And we need to be considering what's in the best interest of the community, the environment, and the impact on the neighbors. And I do not want to see a system go in there that is going to be washed out in the next storm, or that is going to create a safety hazard in terms of access for people that's their only way to get in and out of their residence, and a major inconvenience having to be pumped out every week. And that's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
And Mr. White, you do have one more hand raised. Deborah, if you want to go ahead with your comment, just their name, address, and your comment. Thank you.
It's you.
Dennis.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. My name is George Dennis Richardson. I'm married to Deborah Antle. We bought this property over 40 years ago.
Can you
The
state your
property-
can you state your address, Mr. Richardson?
Number 3
Okay,
Tilden Ave.
thank you.
And number 5 Tilden Ave, which was necessary for me to buy to make my house comply with Title V requirements by the Board of Health of Scituate. I can't guesstimate how many years ago. However, I've been a licensed plumber. I've got thousands of permits that have been pulled in this town for 50 years. I am quite involved in the construction trade. I am now retired. I am not capable of physically doing piping these houses anymore, or 16 and 20-story buildings, which I have done. But I do know that there is a brand new 6-inch water main installed by Scituate town in the last 5 years. I understand that there are requirements as far as setbacks from situations such as the potable water main that goes down Tilden Ave and feeds most of this neighborhood. The distance from those tanks does not seem to be a sufficient distance, and no variance has been applied in regards to the distance of those tanks going from the outside edge of the tank to the water main that's involved in Scituate, involved in Tilden Avenue. There's also gas mains on each side of the house, which that situation has not been addressed whatsoever. There is also the fact that the pilings that were put in under that house were approximately 100 years old. In no way could it match the necessary structural support of a house in that particular kind of condition to be rebuilt on. I understand that that's a building department concern. However, in order to do any digging for in any area of that property, it is so tight to my property, our property lines touch. The surveyor's stake, which was put in by Morse in the last 6 months, is only 2 inches from one of the pilings that is actually on the corner support of the number 1 Tilden. On the opposite end of number 1 Tilden, which is on Tilden Ave itself, I believe that property line is the house is already extending over the property line towards Glades Road. In regards to them applying on this as a septic repair, there is no way 1 piece of pipe in that piece of property is legal by Chapter 142 of the Mass General Plumbing Code, which is supposedly what the Board of Health, I believe, is also governed by. Another thing is that on the plans that I have seen, it appears that they're planning on putting the main drain on the outside of the property rather than running it under it, which means that it would be running parallel and exposed to the elements and getting very close to my property. I didn't see anything in the plans that took any consideration into whether or not that piping would be, the term is, to keep it from freezing if it is beyond the walls of that property. I was also told by the town officials at one time that any improvements to that property would have to comply with the current building codes, health codes, and conservation codes. Nothing has been said about, like I said, the distance from the setback distances from the water main that serves, I know it serves that house. I was here when they dug the hole for their service to that house. I've seen the paperwork claiming that they may move that to the opposite end, which still is not going to bring the water supply system to number 1, and it will definitely affect the water service that goes to number 3, which is my property. And no provisions have been taken or mentioned whatsoever about them in the plans that went over last week. I was out of state last week. I just got back, and my neighbors seem to have a very good handle on it. As far as this property, at times I've got up in the morning to go to work and had to pass 10 people that are sitting out front in the street drinking and partying, which was a hazard to drive out of here. There is absolutely no room at the front of the property on Tilden Ave that any of their tires would end up being on their property. I believe that the posts that the installer intends to put in front of the tanks to protect them from, and to prevent people from driving over them, will reduce the width of Tilden Ave between number 1 Tilden and Sprague's property, which is about directly across the street. I don't believe that it's fair to have a tank pumped once a week to be convenient and inexpensive for the contractor that bought it or the contractor that's doing it. Whereas I have put up with an overflowing septic tank from them, which was a 55-gallon drum that collapsed due to the ocean washing in, filling it in, and completely corroding this 55-gallon drum that the septic contractor keeps referring to as a system. This was what was known as, probably was put in the 30s, and it hasn't been a functional one for years. I have other things that I can't remember right at this time. I'm a senior citizen. I'm having difficulty dealing with this situation. I had hoped to, I know it's none of my business, but I had hoped to buy the property, knock it down, and park my car there, which would have been extremely expensive and probably broke me to the point that I couldn't afford it anyway. I highly suggest that this property is investigated structurally and soundly and remeasured and by town officials and come up with a better solution. I think that's all I can say. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. You have no more hands raised.
Okay, Greg, do you have more or anything else you can fill in with what they've, both Heather and Deborah's had talked about? I'm sorry.
I continue to hear a lot of concerns about zoning aspect, building aspect, FEMA aspect, structural integrity of the building. That's not Board of Health. That's not why we're here. Those comments should be directed to the building department or the zoning board. We're here just for the septic system. I did hear recurringly comments about the frequency of pumping. Okay, this is a tight tank. It has no leaching component. So yes, it has to be pumped out on a fairly regular basis. We're providing 600 gallons of capacity here. Okay. A one bedroom house is supposed to generate 110 gallons per day. That's what Title V makes us design for. Okay. My experience and what I've noticed is that essentially has a factor of 2 built on it. Most bedrooms in town are generating 55 gallons a day of flow. And so with that being the case, if this site was continually occupied and we actually produced 55 gallons of flow per day, you'd be pumping this system out, just about every 10 days is what the requirement would be. So four times a month, 3 times a month, excuse me, just during the season when it's used. Over the course of the winter, there would be no pumping. So there wouldn't be any hindrance. Pumping out a tank of this size, 600 gallons, is a relatively quick effort. Both of these tanks have covers to grade. A septic tank would back up to the tanks, would pump them out and would leave. I would expect that, delivery trucks probably park on Tilden Ave fairly regularly. There are other vehicles that park on Tilden Ave fairly regularly. This this would become part of that. I heard questions regarding the water line in the street. As far as I'm aware, you haven't received any comments from DPW or Water Department with respect to the water line in the street. But
Yeah, we did, Greg.
you
I thought I
did,
forwarded them to James.
okay, I apologize. I didn't see those comments. Did,
You already have the bollards. They asked for the bollards and they also asked for, the tanks should be moved. They want the tanks moved as far west as possible.
okay,
To increase the separation to the water service. I don't know if you can go farther west, but that was their comment.
okay, so. Yep, so the bollards, those are the concrete posts that you've heard about. Those are, we have 3 bollards proposed within this property, essentially to prevent vehicles from driving over these tanks. You know, whether that really doesn't encroach into the Tilden Ave right of way. That's not public traversed area. It's purely to protect these 2 tanks that would be installed. With regard to erosion at the site, I heard comments from the abutters regarding erosion. Whether these 2 tanks go in or a 2,000-gallon tank or even a septic system for that matter, you're always going to be subject to the same level of erosion on this site. So, you know, we would obviously be continually, repairing the site after any storm events that would cause erosion. You'd be doing that regardless of what type of system was here. This is what I really consider a best case design for this site, with the existing house staying as it is. Again, this is not a raise and rebuild. This is not new construction. This is the existing house. If an abutter has a better location for the tight tanks, I would be open to hearing it. If we put in smaller tanks, that would require more pumping more frequently. I put in what I considered a best fit for this site, and I turn it back over to you.
Okay.
Well, can I speak?
Sure, go ahead, Bill.
Okay. One of the comments was made that the so-called septic system, which was the 55-gallon drum, was damaged by the gas company in repairing a gas line. That is incorrect. The gas company did dig a trench to repair their gas pipe, which was in the middle of the road in back of the house, what we call minor terrace. And when they did, the side wall of the 55-gallon drum caved in from corrosion, and all the slurry from the 55-gallon drum washed into the gas pit. They have to get environmental people. It was 2 to 3 days for them to fix that. So that statement that the gas company damaged it is false. The Powerses who owned the house previously pursued the gas company and the gas company was found not at fault due to the corrosion of the 55-gallon drum. So that's one thing. But as far as the erosion, the Tilden Ave is a runway right to the salt marsh, and both minor terrace on the backside is also. We get extreme erosion there, and we have the gas pipe was exposed a few years ago, and they had to come down and do a repair because the pipe was leaking. The gas pipe was leaking due to the erosion and the damage from the storm. This is a very volatile area down here. The cars have washed down Tilden Ave down almost to the marsh, and it's really needs attention. These tanks will be in front of the house. If they were underneath the house, if the house was reduced in size, or the tanks were put underneath the house, that would alleviate some of the concern about the erosion, because underneath the house as it sits now has not suffered damage. It's the runway of Tilden Ave that would be concerned with the runaway. And these tanks could possibly float and be off in the marsh somewhere, if they weren't weighted down in some fashion. So thank you.
And Mr. White, Heather Sprague has her hand raised again. If you want to take a
Yep.
comment now, yes. Heather, you can go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to respond to the comment that vehicles are frequently parking on Tilden Ave, delivery vehicles and the like. There is no way that delivery trucks are frequently parked there. No one would be able to get in or out of the street. There is some parking that happens right next to the house, but I don't think that a septic tank is going to be able to fit in that narrow of a spot. So it's going to be blocking the street for the duration of the time. And what I'm hearing is that this could be every 10 days that this is going to need to be pumped out. And so when the developer says that this is the best case design without it being a raise and rebuild, I would urge the board to consider requiring this to be a raise and a rebuild. I just don't see how this design can be approved, because it's going to create a huge burden on everybody that lives here, and that is going to need to get up and down this street, which is a very, very, very tight space. That's all. Thank you.
Right, but as Andrew stated, we can't tell the developer the house is there, that he needs to tear it down and rebuild it or bring it up to code. That's all through the building inspectors, the EPA and all that. All we are here to do is just approve the tanks to go in for that unit, just like any other house that we've done down in the Glades or in Humrock or anything.
How many other houses on this street on Tilden Ave have 600-gallon tight tanks of this design? So you're saying any design that he proposes, you will just rubber stamp that variance?
We're not even gone to that part yet, but I mean, we're going by what he's saying, seeing the plans. We're hearing what you have to say, and we, appreciate the comments. I'm just saying we can't go to the owner. It'd be like me coming to you and saying, because there's no parking, you need to park in North Scituate and walk home every night.
Well, I have full parking at my house. So
right. No, I'm just saying.
But I didn't buy it as is, where is house, and now expect to put in 600-gallon tanks that are going to force everybody else not to be able to get to their property.
I don't think
every 10 days.
So Doug,
well, no, and again, they're the only time that someone's there to pump, and knowing where this house is and where Glades Road is, they might even be able to run a line down the side of the road and park out on Glades Road to do it. And,
There's no parking on Glades Road.
Huh?
There's no parking allowed on Glades Road.
Okay. So
Doug,
right.
Doug, can I just
Yep.
can I just intervene here? So when the Board of Health agent determined that the septic system was in failure at this house, she notified the owners at that time that they had 1 year to fix it, or fix it immediately. Well, they decided that they were not going to, and as a result, they walked away from the house. And this new owner has an agreement with when he bought this house, before he closed, he had to have agreement with the Board of Health, because now it's the transfer of the septic system to a new owner, that he has to replace the system, the current system that's currently there. Now, he has purchased this house that is there, and we're making him fix the current system that is there for this particular house. So that's per Title V. That's really what the Board of Health is doing right now for that. So the system has to be fixed for the current house that's there.
Can I ask a question of the board? This house has many deficiencies. Structurally, the windows are falling out of it. They're now boarded over. There's no insulation in the house. There's no heating system in the house. This is a house that is under standards, and what is the cost of bringing it to a habitable house, and does it exceed the value of the house? The house is valued at $54,000. $27,000 would exceed the 50%. I think this needs to, the total package needs to be examined as to what the septic system cost, what the renovations to the house would be to make it pass and get an occupancy permit. This house has been condemned. It's not, the developer purchased it as a condemned house. He knew what he was buying. There is no hardship involved. He's a speculator, and he's looking for the cheapest way out, not what's best for the house or the community.
So just on the condemned part, the Board of Health condemned the house because of the septic system, and a condemnation from the Board of Health, a septic system, would be a little bit different than a condemnation for a house because of the building department, because of structural deficiencies. We don't have the ability to tell whether a house is structurally sound or not. That's not our expertise. I'm just trying on the condemnation part of it.
But shouldn't, where it has been condemned, shouldn't it be reviewed by the rest of the boards to decide whether it's actually livable? There's no fire alarms in it. There's nothing meets the standard. There's been nothing done to this house in over.
They're gonna rehab it, I'm
I've
assuming.
been here through the whole of it.
Right, and I mean, I think what Drew's kind of saying is, we're on the condemned part of the septic system. That's what we are.
Sorry,
here.
I can't hear you. It looks.
I said, what Drew had said, we're here because of the condemn of the septic system. And that's what we're here to vote on, to fix, and, you know, what we've been talking about. Anything to do with, you know, windows falling out or beams in the house, or, you know, shutters or whatever, that all goes through building departments and electrical departments and all that, that as he pulls a permit to, you know, refix the house or put new wires in, those all have to go through them with meetings and come out, look at it, make the adjustments. We have nothing to do with anything of the physical structure. We're just approving to make it sound on the septic system.
Shouldn't they all get together and decide?
Of course they should,
Why is it all individual?
because they don't want to do it right. They don't care.
Is there any other questions or concerns?
Mr. White, you have no more hands raised currently.
Okay. Karen or Kelly, do you have any questions or comments or anything?
Joan, do you have any more details for us that you haven't?
Oh, I do. I have some comments and I have some recommendations for the board. When Greg was talking about the erosion over the system, you know, we would definitely have the board recommend that. And that when it is to be fixed, that any approvals for that need to be going through conservation first before anything gets fixed. Just to make sure they're doing it appropriately because of conservation. And there will be an O&M agreement for this. I would suggest that the system be reviewed at the beginning of the season and at the end of the season. There'll be a deed restriction recommended deed restriction for this house for seasonal use, which would be 6 months. It will have a 1-bedroom deed restriction. It will have a tight tank deed restriction, all registered with the Plymouth County Registry of Deeds. What else here? Let's see. That's all I have right now. Seeing that it's a seasonal house, I think that you should recommend do the seasonal house deed restriction to keep it that way. I think that's all we had for our comments.
And that all has to, this is all pending to Conservation Committee approval, right?
Correct.
Okay,
Mr.
I
White,
mean,
you
it's a
do have
tight, it's a really tight spot. We want the septic system fixed. We have a record of a failed system that we've had there since 2015. So as far as Title V goes, that needs to be fixed for this current property that exists as today.
okay. It looks like Francis,
I would just make a final comment. I know this really has nothing to do with your jurisdiction, but I just want to get it on the record. For 60 or 70 years, that house has been used as a multi-bedroomed house by dozens of people year-round. The group that lived there, the Powerses, lived there year-round for years. The idea that by putting a restriction of seasonal isn't going to work. The reason why they're staying with the one bedroom is so they don't have to ask you for 2,000 gallon worth of a tank. It's never been a one bedroom. It was never used as a one bedroom. It was always used as a party house. And the people that live there year round. So the idea that you're gonna make it a seasonal house with one bedroom only, I know your intentions are honorable, but I can guarantee you that's not what's gonna happen. So that's all.
Well, the board, the Board of Health gets all the pumping records from all the pumping haulers. So we will see, we would be able to see a change in that if we see it being a frequent use, being pumped every other day or whatever. We'd be able to see that change. So we would know it would have more, we have more people in there, so it has more use, and then we would go to the owners.
There's no parking whatsoever, but I can get you down there maybe this summer or next summer when there'd be 10, 15 people in there, 8 or 9 cars parked all over the place. And back then, at least maybe not now, toilet system, there was just a 4-inch plastic pipe hanging out of the back of the house into the ground. This is going to be better if it's allowed, and it sounds like the way you folks are dealing with this, if I read between the lines, you're going to allow these to go 2 inches instead of 10 feet. I guess this developer must have been clairvoyant. But thank you for your time.
thank you. So Kelly, Karen.
Yeah, can
any-
I just ask Greg, is there an anchoring system for the tanks?
I'm not showing one on the plans, but if you wanted to specify that they were anti-flotation anchoring, we'd be okay with that.
We do have an iron frame on it, which is required.
Yeah, that's more for the pump out as opposed to the plant. Yep.
Right.
Karen?
Nope, no more questions for me.
Okay. Does someone want to make a recommendation? And I know we have the conditions in that, but then also just to make sure that we add in about the seasonal part of it.
So can we do a motion on the variances that we have listed? And then maybe Joan could restate the conditions that we're looking to have put on the deed restriction? And then we could have one of you
Hold on.
guys make a motion on that.
That's probably better, right, Joan?
Sure.
Okay. So Karen or Kelly?
You give it up, Kelly, or do you want me to?
Go ahead, Karen.
All right, so I'll move to approve the tight tank design plan for the following upgrades requested. Reduction from required 10 feet to 0.2 feet between the tight tanks and the property line along Tilden Ave. Reduction from the required 10 feet to 4.4 feet on the tight tank number 1 and the property line between number 1 Tilden, number 3 Tilden. The reduction from required 10 feet to 9.5 feet between the tight tank number 1 and the property line between number 1 Tilden and number 143 Glades. A reduction from required 10 feet to 8.7 feet between the tight tank number 2 and the property line between number 1 and number 3 Tilden. The reduction from required 10 feet to the 5.2 feet between tight tank number 2 and the property between number 1 Tilden and number 143 Glades. Reduction from the required 10 feet to 0.4 feet between the tight tank number 1 and the building foundation number 1 Tilden. Reduction from the required 10 feet to 5.9 feet between the tight tank number 1 and the building foundation number 3 Tilden. Reduction from the required 10 feet to 0.3 feet between the tight tank number 2 and the building foundation number 1 Tilden. Reduction from the required 10 feet to 9.3 feet between the tight tank number 1 and the water service number 1 Tilden. Reduction from required 10 feet to 5 feet between tight tank number 2 and the water service for number 1 Tilden. Reduction from required 10 feet to 5 feet between tight tank number 1 and the water service number 3 Tilden. And reduction from required 10 feet to 9.3 feet between the tight tank number 2 and the water service number 3 Tilden. And finally, to allow the reduction of the minimum 2,000 gallon tank design, the type design requirements to 600 gallons. With a caveat of this is all pending conservation and engineer satisfactory revisions to any of the plan, and then also Joan's recommendations. So I'll move to you, Joan.
Okay, so we recommend a deed restriction for a 1-bedroom, a seasonal house restriction, a tight tank restriction, an operation in all of those will be registered with the Plymouth Registry of Deeds, and that the erosion over the system will be fixed and approved by conservation prior to any work being done on the septic system. An operation and management agreement, beginning of the season and at the end of the season. And I think that was it.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, Karen, how do you vote?
Yes.
Kelly, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Doug votes yes. Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you, everyone. Greg, thank you. Moving on to old business. Drew,
No old business,
how about new business?
no new business.
How about the director's report?
We have the director's report. We have 17 plans under review right now. 6 plans are awaiting Concom. 5 plans are awaiting revisions from the engineer. We have 21 as-builts and we have 28 systems that are in failure. Our COVID numbers are still steady, right around, we had 8 cases, I think last week, or anywhere between, 10 and 20 for the week for the most part. We are not giving out any more booster shots here at the Board of Health, but we do strongly recommend that people do get their boosters. They are readily available at all of the pharmacies. I know down in CVS and over in North Scituate, they both have them. You don't even have to call. You can just go in and you'll be able to get the shots while they're there. So we do want to still make sure that people are aware that you should be getting your boosters. We have given out over 480 flu shots. We did do 2 clinics. We still do have shots available, but we have nothing for over 65, the high dose. We don't have any of that left. If people want to get a flu shot, they can just call down here Wednesday, Thursday morning, and Eileen is in, and she'd be more than happy to give anyone a flu shot who would be in need of one. Hopefully this week we'll be getting a good blast of frost that will put an end to the mosquito season. We'll be looking forward to that. We didn't have any positive EEE pools at all this season that I was aware of in Plymouth County at all. So that's pretty exciting. We did have a few West Nile virus cases, but I didn't see anything on EEE. So that's really good. And then I also wanted to let you know that we did send out 327 Central Ave to be reviewed. And when we get those comments back, we'll make sure that the engineer gets them and we'll look forward to their response to that. But we did send it out and we're going to get comments. And so hopefully we'll get that squared away. And that is all I have for the director's report today.
So I have a question. What about, and Kelly, you probably can answer it, and Karen, RSV?
Yeah, it's a big problem. Picking up a lot of PDICU beds. I know hospitals are struggling. You know, they think it's because we were not exposed being masked for a few years and it's serious.
So we don't have community tracking. All we're looking at is emission rates right now. So that's the only way you can really track it right now.
And I heard some, and I'm not, I guess, up on it, but adults can get it too,
They get a version of it.
a version of it.
It's probably not the same as,
A kid, it's worse.
but they
for the
do get a
kid.
version. Yes, but they can get a version
It's
of
more,
it.
it's infants under 1, right? Under 1 and 2 years old, yeah.
Yeah, that's typical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Other business, Board of Health meetings.
We
Minutes?
have to accept the minutes from the last meeting.
I'll move to accept the minutes.
And second,
Second,
and Karen, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Kelly?
yes.
And Doug votes yes. And then I guess the last thing is administrative invoice approvals.
I have 4 administrative invoices. 3 of them are for perk tests for $280 each, and 1 is for a site plan review for $150.
Okay. Someone want to make a motion?
Motion to approve?
I'll
Okay.
Second,
And Karen, how do you vote?
yes.
And Kelly?
Yes.
And Doug votes yes. Okay, anything else, guys? I would say make a motion to close the meeting for the Scituate Board of Health for Monday, November 14th, 2022, Zoom meeting.
I'll second and vote yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Yes.
And Doug votes yes. Other than that, everyone have a great Thanksgiving. Be safe.
You well as well.
Good Thanksgiving,
You too.
everybody,
Happy
okay?
Thanksgiving.
See you
All right.
later.
Good one.